there are things that you're doing that you know you shouldn't do. Now, some of those you won't stop doing for whatever reason. You don't have the discipline, or maybe there's a secondary payoff, or you don't believe it's necessary, or it's too much of a sacrifice, or you're angry or resentful or afraid. Who knows? So forget about those for now. But there's another subset that you could stop doing. It might be a little thing. Well, that's fine. Stop doing it and see what happens. And what will happen is your vision will clear a little bit. And then something else will pop up in your field of apprehension that you will also know you should stop doing, and that you could stop doing, because you've strengthened yourself a bit by stopping doing the particular stupid thing that you were doing before. That just puts you together a little bit more.
You know, when you're in the military, you have this discipline, and beyond the discipline that's imposed on you, you also have a lot that you have to just hold the line yourself. I mean, when you're in the military, sure, you go through boot camp where there's a drill instructor that's yelling and all that, but once you're in the military, you're doing what you have to do. It's self-discipline, that you learn that and you become self-disciplined. And what happens is guys get out, and that's gone, and that hurts them. And the other thing that hurts them is they don't know what their mission is anymore. Mm-hmm. And my big thing with people that I've been telling vets now is find what your next mission is. Go find whatever your next mission is. And I don't care what it is, but it has to be something. When people are not going anywhere, when they're failing, when they don't have the drive, it's because they're not accepting responsibility for anything. And so my way of saying that is like, you need a new mission. You need to be responsible for something, and you need to go and move towards some new mission. And do you encounter people that, or you see people, that's very problematic in the civilian side as well, where people, they just don't know what they're doing. They don't take responsibility for anything.
That's part of this nihilism, is that because, first of all, you learn that truth is relative, and that there's no real moral order. And, that alleviates you of responsibility. And that's why that's such an attractive message to people. But the problem is that it kills you. It kills your soul, so to speak, because, well, when we can talk about this technically. So, there are systems, neurological systems that underlie your experience of negative emotion, and there are neurological systems that underlie your experience of positive emotion, and they're separate systems. They obviously interact, but they're separate systems. So, but the positive emotion system, well, there's two of them, but one of them sort of kicks in when you get something that you want. So, you're hungry and you eat, and that feels good. And so that's kind of the simple one. But there's a more sophisticated one that I think is even more active in people. And it's the one that tells you that you're moving forward towards something worthwhile. And that's actually the one that gives people that sense of meaningful engagement in their life on a moment-to-moment basis. So, and it's also something that doesn't have to go away. Like if you're hungry and you eat, well, that's good, but it's over, and then you're on to the next thing, right? It's not exactly sustaining, it's just necessary. That's called consummatory reward, by the way. This other reward system is incentive reward, and the incentive reward system works on dopamine, this neurochemical dopamine, which is also the neurochemical tracks that opiates and cocaine and amphetamines, the drugs that people really like to abuse, alcohol often for some people, activate. And so you might say if you don't have enough meaning in your life, then you're more prone to addiction. And that's definitely the case, even with rats. If you take a rat and you put him in a cage by himself and he has nothing to do, and then you give him access to cocaine, he'll get addicted to the point where he won't do anything but take cocaine. But if you throw the rat back in with a bunch of other rats and he gets to do rat things, then it's very hard to get him addicted to cocaine. And so the purposeless rat is prone to addiction. Well, it's the same with human beings. Now, here's a corollary to that, which is really cool. So the magnitude of the reward you experience as you're moving towards a goal is proportionate to the importance of the goal. So that means the more important the goal you pick, the more possibility there is for the kind of reward, let's say, it's really a state of being that is life-affirming. And it is directly life-affirming in that, like if you're in a football game and it's an important football game and maybe you break a finger, and normally that's a problem. It hurts, and you're going to stop doing whatever you're doing. But if you're right in the middle of the game, then you'll be so amped up on this reward system that it's analgesic. It stops the pain. It also suppresses anxiety. So if you have a purpose, then it's analgesic. It takes some of the pain out of life. it's very positive in that it motivates and energizes you and focuses you and makes you able to remember and pay attention. And it quells fear.
Discipline starts with waking up early. It really does. You absolutely have to apply it to things beyond waking up early. It is working out every day, making yourself stronger and faster and more flexible and healthier. It is eating the right foods to fuel your system correctly. It is disciplining your emotions so you can make good decisions. It is about having the discipline to control your ego so it doesn't get out of hand and control you. It is about treating people the way you would want to be treated. It is about doing the tasks you don't want to do but you know will help you. Discipline is about facing your fears so you can conquer them. Discipline means taking the hard road, the uphill road, to do what is right for you and for others. So when those foods are tempting you, calling your name, and enticing you with their sugar-coated lies, get angry. Get aggressive. Stand your ground in the battle and fight by saying no. Hold the line. Hold the line for your health, your mental toughness, and exercise your will, which I promise is stronger than the will of a donut, if you want it to be. So hold the line.
And so you might think, well, if you're going to clean up the world, you might start by cleaning up your phenomenological space and see how far you get with that. It's a very difficult thing to do, but if you do it, the better you get at it, the more capable you are of handling larger and larger problems. And that's how you should start. You should start with what's right in your grasp and with what you can control. See what happens if you stop doing things you know to be inadequate and wrong. So the hypothesis is every time you engage in an activity like that, you weaken yourself. You put yourself down first, you remove your own self-confidence, but you also fail to take the opportunity to expand your domain of competence. What would life be like if you didn't do that? And the existential claim is, it's a weak claim in some ways. The claim is, there's two. One is, if you don't do that, if you don't try to fix the things that you could fix, things will go from bad to worse for your life, and that will spread out, and it will take everyone else's life along with it. So that's on the negative end. So you don't do it because of the negative end. But then there's a positive claim too, which is maybe if you stopped bullying yourself, the tragic conditions of existence would become bearable because you would be strong enough to tolerate them. And it's analogous to Jung's idea of progression towards the self. Because Jung has a very strong existential theme underlying his work, derived mostly from Nietzsche. But it's the most optimistic, it's the only optimistic hypothesis I've ever seen in psychology. You don't make men safe by making them weak. In fact, they're much more dangerous when they're weak because they'll stab you in the back when they get the chance, or take advantage of you when they get the chance. You make men safe, let's say, by making them strong, and then by making sure that they're disciplined. And so, you've got people like you have got this, let's say, warrior mentality that's a deep part of their temperament, and then you have some choices about what you might do with that. You might try to discipline it and bring it under voluntary control and integrate it into your character, in which then it can make you someone who's stalwart and indomitable and who will move forward, in the face of tremendous risk. And that's the optimal pathway if you have that kind of temperament. I think it's the men that have the most, what would you call it? It's not aggressive exactly, but we'll leave it at that. Aggressive and fearless temperaments that can be the best men, but it's like having a very powerful dog. You better discipline it, because otherwise it's going to be a monster.